I concur, and I have one question for you, Jesse.
Yes.
Are you ready for rapid fire?
I've been ready for rapid fire the last week, but you've been in Paris, so.
So are you saying that Vince's rapid fire was no bueno? It was like no
It wasn't
fire?
as rapid as your fire.
I've got to say this. If Vince happens to be listening at some point, okay? Because again, I was listening to the Monday show. The Monday show came 2 days after the Clemson game. And I'm listening to Vince. Vince, how the hell do you get up Monday morning and not know what you're going to talk about? 2 days after the Clemson game. Tell me that, Vince. How do you not know? How do you struggle to find topics Monday morning, 2 days after Notre Dame loses to Clemson?
Very controversial loss.
Come on, man. All right, that's off my chest. Jesse, question to you. We've asked like different forms of this question in different ways. Sam Hartman has 18 touchdown passes right now. I'm not going to go over under. I'm just going to ask you straight up, predict what will his touchdown total be for the season after the Stanford game?
You said he's got 18 right now, I believe.
18 right now. He's had 18 for 3 weeks at this point.
I think his final number is 23 at the end of the regular season. I think he gets 3 against one of them and 2 against the other. Just don't know who that 3 and 2 is against.
Stymie and John, we're all on the same wavelength.
Going 2 a game.
Michael Hahn, 22. I'm going 22 as well. He has 0 touchdowns and 4 interceptions over the last 2 games. And you go back the last 5, 4 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. It's like, where have the touchdowns gone? He had 14 touchdown passes and no interceptions in the first 5 games. The first 5 games, by the way, include what?
Navy.
Ohio State is
Central.
the answer. It includes Ohio State.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you didn't have to rattle off like every game that they played over the first 5. I'm just saying, yes, thank you, Michael. Michael knew what I was pointing at. It included the Ohio State game. 14 touchdown passes, no interceptions through those first 5, including Ohio State, and it's 4-7 over the last 5. It is nuts to me.
I thought I was going to cruise to my bets, and I think I'm going to lose all of them. So
I know. Remember, the Vegas over-under was 26.5 at the start of the season, and we thought that was just insanely low. And look at where
it should be insanely slow.
It should be.
We won't get into that conversation again.
Yep. I'm going to go with 22, and I think that he's going to have some kind of revival against his old team here next week. I guess a week from Saturday. At Stanford, well, I'll tell you what. Save that because we're gonna talk about those 2 games here in just a second. But 22 is my number. I think he's going to have 22 at the end of the regular season. Still stuck on 18 right now. Jesse, what do you think about this comment from Marcus Freeman from after the Clemson game? Quote, "The pick 6 kind of spooks you. It spooks you. It spooks the quarterback a little bit. Makes you say, okay, let's go back to the run game a little bit." What do you think of that?
I think of like 3-4 different things when I heard that comment. I'll start with the first one. I think it was one of the first because he talked about the pick 6 and the muff punt. I think it was the first time I really saw Marcus Freeman kind of not make an excuse, but kind of right. Like it was. It has never been. It's always been the execution thing, and it's never been the excuse of things. And so when he said that, I was a little taken aback. And then the next part that really caught me off guard is throwing that pick 6 came at some point.
We just lost Jesse there. Are you back? Okay, you're back. Well, nope, he is not. I thought he was back, and now he is gone. Jesse started chopping, and then my little wheel started spinning. So hopefully we're all still here together. Are you with me, Jess? You started
Funny.
chopping there in the middle, so maybe just start your thought from the beginning. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that the first thing that it shows is that Marcus Freeman kind of made excuses or deflections for the first time that I've really seen. I think it shows a lack of confidence in your 6th-year quarterback, which is very alarming. And if it spooks you into running the ball, that pick six came, midway second quarter, I think at the latest or the earliest, I can't remember. And so, but you didn't run the ball very much after that. And so how do you make that sort of statement and say it spooks you? You might think about running the ball, but then you don't do anything to run the ball after you already ran the ball pretty successfully to start the game. And so there was a lot of contradictory in there as well for me.
I find it baffling that we're, again, like this was game 10 of the season. And the fact that is something that was said after game 10 with a quarterback who's the most experienced quarterback in the most experienced quarterback in the country coming into this season with all that this guy had under his belt and just what he looks like right now. And like the fact that you can make that statement and say, well, it spooks you. Like, look, Peyton Manning threw pick sixes. Tom Brady has thrown pick sixes.
I was listening to the Manning cast on Monday night. Peyton Manning threw 28 interceptions in his first year in the NFL.
Yeah, like it happens. And you've just got to say, look, you're our guy. We're going back to it. I don't care what just happened. Like, to say that would spook you into to altering your game plan like that just, it baffles me, because this is not Drew Pine we're talking about. And to me, they handled it with kid gloves. If that's really, kind of, if it really spooked him that much, they handled it and tried to protect him, like more like he was Drew Pine than he was Sam Hartman. And unfortunately, when you, again, like, go back to what we were talking about with the offense earlier. When you look at this offense, unfortunately, you can't tell much difference. And the numbers are actually far worse under Sam Hartman right now than they were a year ago with Drew Pine at the helm. Those 4 touchdowns and 7 interceptions over the last 5 games. Drew Pine didn't have a 5-game stretch like that last year. So it's baffling to me that that's the mindset that you would have. And again, I like to say, well, you think about running it a little bit. Well, that's not what you showed in the second half, because Audric Estime only toted that thing 3 times in the second half.
So what about this? I just kind of maybe thought about it in new perspective. Do you think that Marcus Freeman led with that, knowing that Sam Hartman didn't have his best game in the second half, and that the pick six is what led him to maybe some of those spooky throws, or those because he had some off throws in the second half? And so was that him getting out of it early and saying, hey, before you get into Sam Hartman's play in the second half, just know that interception in the first half spooked him. And so that's probably what led to his inaccurate throws in the second half. I'm just thinking a different perspective. But now that I think about it more, I think that's another possibility of why he led with that.
Yeah. This is a great comment by John B. He says he shouldn't get spooked with his experience. It's an occupational hazard as a quarterback. Marcus Freeman always banging about one play, one life, etc. Practice what you preach. And that's
next play. Why are we worrying about an interception that's spooking us?
And Josh says, wonder if he, meant deflating. Well, I think to an extent that it was deflating, but at the same time, like, it's that tail end of the comment that Marcus Freeman said. It's like, to me, it was less about being deflating and more just about, oh my gosh, he just threw a pick six. Now we've got to protect him. And, we can't take chances. We're on the road and we're in this game. And, so again, it does not sound like and it wasn't a statement of confidence in the quarterback, in the way
that's the biggest takeaway.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Fill in the blank. You feel blank about Notre Dame's next 2 games against Wake Forest and Stanford.
I feel not really excited about Notre Dame's next 2 games against Wake Forest and Stanford. because they blew opportunities to be in the playoffs. They blew opportunities to be the New Year's Six. And now with all of this just disaster of offensive cocktail that's happening, I just kind of want it to be done with. I don't want to see this offense struggle anymore. I don't want to see, I don't want potentially Notre Dame to lose another game, because I think that brings up questions about Marcus Freeman. And I don't think that I don't think it's time for any of that yet. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's, if Marcus Freeman loses another game, sure, I don't think he really got better, but I don't think that's a fireable offense. And after 2 seasons, and I think that'll lead to a lot of, those sort of discussions. And so I'm really sad about, what has now transpired and what these last 2 games kind of mean to everyone, but it's just not as meaningful, obviously, after the loss to Clemson. And I think really there's no winning at this point. Even if you win these games, there's going to be something that people are going to be upset about.
I'm much more uneasy about them than I ever would have thought that I would be.
I would just hope that they would be more experimental at this phase. What do you have to lose ultimately?
You want them to be experimental?
Just break out of some tendencies on offense. Be more experimental on offense.
Oh, that I agree with.
Trying new things, trying new looks out of maybe some formations that you've showed. You have 2 weeks, another bye week. You have 2 weeks to just take in some of this feedback and really try to get I'm not saying go crazy, but just show that you tried. Show that you're listening to what people are saying.
John says he's very confident, and there's no way Notre Dame loses to Wake Forest or Stanford. I agree with what Tim, did I put that comment up there from Tim? Stanford just scares the heck out of me right now. Like, I think that Wake Forest, because it's a home game and, they might not start fast. I don't know. I think Notre Dame's defense will just own Wake Forest. The question is going to be the offense, and you are talking about a really smart coaching staff at Wake Forest who does know Sam Hartman and his own tendencies very well, coupled with the fact that you have some other troubling, tendencies and stuff like that he has shown this season. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm a lot more uneasy about it. And the Stanford game, I've really been scared of Stanford really since that comeback against Colorado. And now, granted, as much as Notre Dame's offensive line has struggled at times, their offensive line is still far better than Colorado's, and their defense is in a completely different league than Colorado's. But still, the fact that Stanford could come back and win that game at Colorado, and then look at their last couple of games. They scored points on Washington. They scored 33 points on Washington, and that was a home game. And then they played a defensive game and beat Washington State 10-7 last week. So that, coupled with what happened last year at Notre Dame Stadium against Stanford, that game scares the heck out of me right now. The fact that the way Notre Dame has played on the road these last few games, yes, they've been against better teams than Stanford, but it's scary going on the road to close the season in a game that's probably not going to be very well attended. What the atmosphere is going to be like there is going to be really weird. I don't know. I have no idea what to expect in that game. So I'm very uneasy about both these games. Brian threw this question in earlier. Thoughts on Penn State playing Michigan at noon instead of a night game in Happy Valley? Remember, the Big Ten doesn't like these night games in November. They're complaining about it with the NBC contract and all this stuff. And of course, they've got the contract with Fox. So it's a big noon kickoff, and all their premier games involving Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State are noon kickoffs. So I don't have a problem with it, and I'll at least get to watch some of it before I fly to New Jersey this weekend.
I wish that the Big Ten would put its premier games in the evening time. I just think it makes it more exciting, more watchable. But I understand why they do it at noon. They like you said, they like to put their premier games there. It's what they believe is going to get the best ratings because it has its undivided, the nation's undivided excuse me, attention. And so it just makes logistical sense for the Big Ten, and it's not ever really.
I paid for a mute button for you. Paid for a mute button.
I couldn't get it quite in time. I couldn't, as I was turning, I couldn't see the mute button, so I just kind of, I just had to let it go.
Bill asks about playing the two young quarterbacks, and this is still. Let me ask you this: should we just? I know you guys did a little bit about it the other day. You ended up talking about a lot of other stuff before. Like, should we just dedicate a whole show to tomorrow to sort of this theme? What should happen with the quarterbacks? You want to do that?
Yeah, I think you can do what should happen to end the season and what should happen going forward. I think you could lump it all into what does Notre Dame do at quarterback starting now?
Yes. It's a good question, Bill. It's something that obviously I haven't got a chance to talk about yet. So rather than kind of pin it here as one of multiple topics at the end of rapid fire, I think we'll get into that big picture, not just with the quarterback, but how they should approach the overall against Wake Forest and Stanford at some different positions in terms of how they need to play this the next couple games. You want to just do that tomorrow?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay.
It is the bye week.
That's exactly right. Okay, so Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, and Florida State are the top 4 teams in the second college football playoff rankings that just came out. Scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you those 4 teams will be the playoff teams when it's all said and done?
10 being extremely confident, 1 being non-confident at all. I would give this a solid 3 out of 10. I think that Ohio State will be in the Final Four. I think Florida State will be in the Final Four. I don't think Michigan will be in the Final Four, and I don't think Georgia will be in the Final Four. I think you'll get Washington in there potentially, and then if Georgia loses, it'll probably be at the hands of Alabama, and so I think Alabama sneaks in as your SEC team. So from the SEC, I think it goes Bama, Big Ten, Ohio State, Pac-12, Washington, ACC, Florida State. That's my Final Four.
It is crazy how everyone just wrote off Alabama after that loss to Texas with all the stuff they were going through at quarterback. And I mean, let's face it, the quarterback situation looked pretty abysmal. But here they are lurking.
Figured it out.
That's right. And they are sitting there at number 8 right now. And I agree with you. I think that Alabama is probably going to find themselves right back in
loss
there.
SEC championship,
yeah.
And the committee loves that.
They're going to work their way in. Florida State and what that looks like. Can Florida State, they're going to run the table, I think, in the regular season. That Florida game lurking here. They got Florida and Miami here coming up. And I think they're better than both teams, but they are rivalry games, 2 out of their last 3. And then they're probably going to get Louisville in the ACC championship game. So
I don't think the ACC championship will have any weight on whether or not they get in or out. I think that's just an extra game for them. I don't think it'll be
really.
Them.
You think they can lose that and still make it in?
Yeah, I do.
I'm with you though. I'm like a 4. I don't think that it's probably going to be them. I think Alabama, as you said, is working their way back in there, and I really like Washington as well. I think that Washington is going to get back in there as well. I think it's going to be different though. I think Michigan's going to beat Ohio State. You seem to think maybe you've lived in Ohio too long. You seem to be on the Buckeye train, that the Buckeyes are going to beat Michigan. Is that what you're saying?
I am. I do think that Ohio State wins this.
But the question there is, they're probably going to play in back-to-back weeks, which we talked about at the beginning of the season. Can whoever wins the regular season game win 2 weeks in a row, Big Ten championship game? That'll be kind of the X factor there. And if they split, what does that mean? Do they both still get in? Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame freshman point guards Markus Burton and Hannah Hidalgo both scored the most points ever for an Irish freshman in their debut games Monday.
It's electric for both programs. It's electric for both the future of both basketball programs. I was trying to find the best way to put that in there. And I think, it's more so exciting for the men's because of just you didn't know what the roster was going to look like. You didn't know who the guy was going to be. But if you had to pick what would be best, I would say it'd be best for a freshman, right? Because that means they have the longest potential amount of time of probably being at Notre Dame. And so I think that only leads to more kind of growth going forward. I'm not as excited about the Hidalgo. It's exciting, but I'm not as excited because Notre Dame the women have probably the best combination of guards in the country when everyone's healthy. And so I don't think Hidalgo's performance is reflective to what you'll see the entire season. I think with Citron still being out, those numbers are a bit inflated. I don't think she'll see as much usage with Sonia Citron coming back. So while it was exciting, I just think that, again, when you have
Olivia
that
Miles
three-header
coming back.
Sorry, that's what I meant. Olivia Miles. Thank you. Again, I get them all confused. It's like the three-headed monster at guard right now for them. But yeah, when Olivia Miles comes back, I think that there will be, again, a different usage between those three. All three of them will play, but Hidalgo is going to see a reduction once Olivia Miles is back.
There's an interesting question here that I'll get to in just a second about KK Bransford that someone asked earlier. I think when I look at this, it kind of reminds me of it's been 20 plus years at this point when Chris Thomas and Jackie Batiste were both freshmen the same year. Chris Thomas walked in and, had a triple double in his first career game for Notre Dame. And both of them, Batiste and Thomas, I believe they were both Big East rookies of the year the same year, and they were both freshman All-American that same year as well. There's like a little bit of that. I mean, you're right. Like from the women's standpoint, there's always going to be, it's, like Hidalgo walks into a situation where obviously there's a base set and there's a lot around her as well. But to walk in the door and have that kind of game, even though you lose it ended up being an uglier game than anyone wanted to see, especially in the second half. But to do it against that level of competition right away, I think really speaks well for her. But at the same time, like you were saying, for Markus Burton and for Micah Shrewsbury, I think it is just a great sign of things to come because, Markus Burton was a little bit, I don't want to say overlooked, but he was the only guy who committed to Mike Bray and who stayed on and is still at Notre Dame. And here he is. He comes in the door and he has that kind of performance right out of the gate. So I just think it's great for Micah Shrewsbury. I think it's great for Markus Burton and the entire program. And I think Stymie or somebody was saying earlier just about the way that team plays. And I think that is going to play for the long haul as well. The way they play hard for 40 minutes, they're interested in playing defense. And I think that's going to be a big difference that like basketball fans have been missing watching this program over the years, that there's more than just the offensive side of the floor. Defense matters as well. Keith was asking, do the women miss KK Bransford? She had a knack for making important, timely shots. And not just, I think it's less the offense. There's a lot of glue with KK Bransford that I think that they're missing. Both, the athleticism, the speed, just the flow of the offense, those kind of things, the defense, really good defensive player. So yeah, to answer your question, I do think they miss KK Bransford, even though they have a lot of other bodies out there right now. She was very important down the stretch last year after Olivia Miles was injured, and I do think that they miss her, and they'll be glad to get her back here, hopefully within the next week or two. She's had like some lower leg kind of stuff going on. She wasn't in uniform for the opener the other night or for the exhibition game before that as well. Oh, Tom is mad about the basketball talk and probably mad about the women's basketball talk. Sorry, we're talking about ranked teams.
In Paris.
Sorry, we're talking about things other than football.
Would you say this was my biggest observation with the women's game? Just I know that obviously you were there and you see it all, and I just see, I saw mainly box score and that kind of stuff. But to me, it felt like Notre Dame played a tremendous first, got really behind in the second. I think it was like an 18-point swing in the second. Like Notre Dame scored only like 8, and I think they were like 24-8, I think is what it was. I just felt like at that point, the final score was the final score, obviously, but I felt like that they dug that hole really early in the second, and there was just no way of kind of coming out of it once the game kind of progressed, And I guess what I'm saying is I don't think that they played bad except for one quarter, and it just really proved to be detrimental.
Yeah. South Carolina swung it in the second because, like, the first quarter, it's looking like, okay, Notre Dame is playing, not just playing with them. Like, this could be a really good game from start to finish. But unfortunately, that only lasted for 10 minutes. Just between the fact that Carmilla Cardozo, South Carolina's big, she was the SEC 6th woman of the year last year. She blocked 70 shots last year coming off the bench. Oof. 70 shots she blocked coming off the bench behind Aaliyah Boston, who ended up being the number 1 overall pick in the WNBA draft. She was only 3 blocks behind her, and she had like 20 points. I think it was 14 or 15 rebounds, and she blocked 4 shots, even though it seemed like she blocked twice as many. Just between her presence in the pace and all the athleticism, like South Carolina came into this season feeling like this was probably the best group of guards that Don Staley has ever had. And that's obviously saying something when you're talking about a program that's won a pair of national championships in the last 6 years. So I think that their athleticism was just off the charts. And for whatever reason, again, like how much a player like KK Bransford played into this, how much maybe having a point guard who, like 31 points is 31 points, and that's great, but it didn't feel like there was a lot of sync, across the offense in that game for Notre Dame. And you're right. They obviously just couldn't dig out of the hole after that. Now, they've got some games coming up where they're going to be able to figure some things out that are going to be a lot easier to figure out than when you're playing against a program like South Carolina. Really, it's going to build up to you're going to play a couple ranked teams. They're going to play Illinois here in a couple of weeks in Washington, D.C. in that Shamrock Classic, and they're going to play Tennessee at the end of the month down in Knoxville. So those are going to be kind of some litmus for where you've come after South Carolina. I see that Henry and Scooby are getting worked up about this whole basketball.
Yeah, I just have a buddy coming over this evening, and I think he's here, so I'm telling him to feed the dog treats and they'll like him.
Yeah, Bryce is just joining in, and he's asking about the Parker demotion. And again, I don't know if this came from the Twitter rumor that started.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Hold on. But based on everything that we're hearing at Irish Breakdown, it's all a load of BS. There's nothing that's going to happen. There's nothing happening here, before Wake Forest or probably before the season is going to end. It's all based on, all the sources that Irish Breakdown is talking to. It's all a bunch of BS that was, started by someone who doesn't actually have sources of his own, but uses other people's information to try to make it sound like he has sources. All right, Jess, I think that's going to do it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll, like I said, we'll kind of get into what direction Notre Dame needs to be looking these last couple of games against Wake Forest and Stanford, and and then the bowl game I think is its own separate situation. But we'll talk about whether it's quarterback or linebacker or whatever other position that it happens to be. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Glad to have you back today.
All right. Glad to be back. Glad to be with you here today. I'm glad the dogs are settled down. All right. We'll wrap it up with that. and we will talk to you tomorrow. Hit the like button and, of course, subscribe, rate, and review. We've got more Notre Dame football talk coming up on Thursday's show on IB Nation Sports Talk.